What do Beyonce, luxury travelers, and the most outrageous guest requests have in common? They have all crossed paths with our guest today, Jamie Cooperstein. From marble floors of five diamond hotels to classrooms and boardrooms across the country, Jamie has mastered the art of creating unforgettable experiences. As a former concierge to the stars, the president of Philadelphia Area Concierge Association, and a hospitality educator with a master's degree from Temple University. Oh, and by the way, a new author. She now teaches companies and employees and students how to elevate service to an art form. Get ready for real stories, real insights, and powerful strategies to turn complaints into loyalty and service magic. Stick around because you're about to learn what true hospitality really looks like. Welcome to the Yes Show. I'm your host, Christine Trippi. Each week, we'll explore the life-changing power of saying yes, along with hotel leadership made easy. Get ready for inspiration, fun, and sweet hospitality. Let's go. All right, Jamie, you said yes to transitioning from aspiring sports journalist to a career in hospitality. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so it was a difficult decision. So for as long as I could remember, I had always wanted to be a sports broadcaster. That was my love. And I studied that in school. My first internships and even my first few jobs out of school were in the world of sports journalism. And there was this pivotal moment where a former boss of mine gave me some news that kind of stopped me in my tracks and made me second guess that career decision. And I had to make a pivot. And I had a conversation with my mom seeking advice. I feel like a lot of people can relate to asking a parent or a loved one for advice. And my mom said, "Why don't you have a conversation with your cousin Jeff?" And my cousin Jeff worked at the Rittenhouse Hotel in Philadelphia. Now, I had been aware of this, but I had never, ever visited him at the hotel. I had never stepped inside of this hotel whatsoever. I just knew it was a really fancy, luxurious place to work. So I had a conversation with him, and he shared all of the amazing things that there are to have when it comes to working in luxury hospitality. And all he was able to promise me was an interview. I had to get myself the job. So he kept his word, which is he got me an interview with the director of front office. And again, this was in 2004. And I was 22 years old, and I knew nothing about making a great first impression at the time. I knew nothing about luxury hospitality, and pulled a rabbit out of a hat and ultimately won over this front office manager. And she offered me the position, not as a front desk agent, which is what I thought I was going in to interview for, but instead a concierge. And I said yes. And the rest is history.
The best yes you ever made, right?
Correct.
That is so, I just love hearing people's story and how they landed where they were and how they came to be. It's just so much fun. You may know that I believe we can change the world one yes at a time. What is one of your most powerful yes as a concierge to one of your guests that almost didn't happen? That maybe was a really hard no, but you made it happen. Can you think of a time?
I can. So one of the things about, being a concierge, certainly at first, is you have to kind of fake it till you make it and really gain your confidence. Mm-hmm. And as a naive 22-year-old, there were a lot of questions and requests that I would field that were nerve-wracking or were a question or a topic that I wasn't super comfortable with. So I'll kind of lay the foundation for this strange request and how I ultimately was able to turn it into a yes when really in my mind I was like, no. So a bride from Florida was coming in for her wedding in Philadelphia. And this is again when I was working at the Rittenhouse Hotel. And this was an over the phone request before she got on the plane to arrive in Philly. And she was seeking a Botox appointment. Now, keep in mind, this is 2004. Botox had just gotten approval by the FDA, and I had no idea what this word was. I had
Right.
never heard it before. So thankfully was on the phone with this customer and was able to put her on a brief hold after saying, "That's a great question. Let me find out for you."
Good girl.
And, and ultimately, did a little Googling, turned to the front desk associate and said, "Help me, what is Botox?" And ultimately I quickly learned what it was, what it meant. And at the time, Botox was only available at a plastic surgeon's office, because it was not a mainstream appointment back then.
Mhm.
So lucky for me, there happened to be a plastic surgeon's office in the retail space in the Rittenhouse Hotel's complex.
Wow.
Right? Unbelievable luck that I was
Right.
finding
Wow.
myself in. Quickly got them on the phone and said, "Do you offer this procedure?" They did. And I was able to connect bride to be with the plastic surgeon's office. They were able to accommodate. And the reason that this also was partly in my mind to know, not just because I didn't know what it was, but I
Mhm.
also learned that you really can't pass judgment on a guest
Mhm.
or customer, because even though I was perhaps rolling my eyes over this request, it's a yes world. And this was the request. Therefore, I have to grant her wish.
Right. I love this, especially if you've been tuning into the podcast. I've had a recent fumble with Botox. And when I saw that in the book, I was like, oh, I got to read this story. So I love the Botox story. I didn't know that's the one you were going to tell. I love that so much, though. Yeah, great stories. As a matter of fact, let's dive into the exciting launch of your new book, True Hospitality, which I have right here. I've got some markings to talk about as well. Now, it is filled with fun stories, which you have a chapter called Addiction, Porn, and Prostitute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, really fun and exciting stories in there, and a lot of hospitality wisdom. So, tell us about the inspiration to write it and a little bit about what people will find.
Sure. So, although I was a journalism major in college and loved to write, I never thought I was going to be an author. I really did not. And it wasn't until I started in the concierge profession and there were kind of these wild and crazy guest encounters happening, kind of like the
Mhm.
Botox story, where I just started to keep a list, kind of a running tally of just names of stories. And, maybe there was like 10 or 12 of these stories. And then I did nothing with this list. It just got tucked away. Life got in the way, got married, had a kid, started a business, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't until the very beginning of the pandemic in April 2020, when
Oh,
business was not going well, as you could appreciate, and I needed to do something for my own self-care. And I signed up for a virtual writing class. And that virtual writing class was truly kind of the jumping off point, the springboard of me saying, I now have the time to write this. And if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So it was a 5-year journey from April 2020 till April 2025, finally, of my book coming out. But yeah, it's a memoir. It's not a business book, although there are certainly lessons to be
yes,
learned and
there are.
educational, but it is a memoir. Written from the perspective of an hourly worker getting a quick education on the job, and all of kind of the wild and crazy, kind of tell all things that happen behind the scenes in the world of luxury hospitality.
Yes, I love that. And it's so funny how many books came out because of COVID. So there, as challenging, as horrible as that time was, so many good things because people had the time to give to the world what they have inside. And that's what we need. We need all of your gifts. So if you're one of those people thinking, I've got a story in me, you can do this. And I love how you began with a writing class. I loved it.
Absolutely. And you know what? Even if your aspiration is not to publish a book, but just to pull out a notebook and journal, there is
Mhm.
something so cathartic about just writing down your thoughts, professional or personal. I have found great joy in that.
Yes. And I wish that I had that insight 38 years ago to really log those stories, because there's so many more that I know are there, but I'm not tapped into my memory of them. I have so many stories that I do share, but I know there's so many more that I've forgotten. I wish I had kept that journal. So you mentioned that you worked at the Rittenhouse, which is one of Philadelphia's most iconic luxury hotels. And it's known for its refined elegance, personalization, and service, and also the prime location. So I love the line in your book where you say, in matter of fact, I've got that flag. Let me just read off here. Um, the back of the house, this was your very first day. The back of the house reminded me of a New York City subway. The lobby's shiny marble surfaces felt like they belonged in an entirely different zip code. The contrast between that polished luxury Rittenhouse and then the gritty, hectic energy behind the scenes is powerful. What did that first impression teach you about the reality of hospitality, and how did it shape your approach for service?
Oh, that's such a good question. So interestingly, just yesterday, I was back at the Rittenhouse Hotel,
Oh,
having a book launch event, and I was sharing with all of the attendees that they should visit the restroom at some point before they departed, because just past the restroom there was a magical door, a secretive door that said "Associates only."
only.
And that door was the door that I'm referring to in the book, that especially on that very first day after putting on my uniform, so nervous. And then I
Mm-hmm.
was even more nervous when I passed through the door and kind of heard my, feet clicking on the marble for the very first time. And yeah, I talk a lot about that uniform was my protection, so to speak. It was my costume. And it allowed me to not just be my, regular old 22-year-old low key self, but I literally became this refined five diamond concierge because of that uniform and the confidence it gave me.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, serving guests, serving customers, you just need to treat them with authenticity, and just share, almost pretend it is if as if it was yourself, and what would you want in that situation. You don't need to put on a front, you don't need to try to impress.
Mm-hmm.
Be gracious and kind and welcoming, and I feel like you will always do right by the customer if you do that.
Yes, yes. But I can think back to the when I started at the Marriott Chicago Northwest. It was a brand new hotel, and I remember it was not the Rittenhouse, but I remember walking through the front doors and literally going, oh, because I thought it was so beautiful. Now, the contrary, though, here is that every hotel I've ever worked at prior to that and after that, the back of the house was just like what you described. But at that Marriott, you could literally eat off the floor in the back of the house. I
Wow.
was shocked. And now it was newer, but still not like brand new, like it hadn't been operating. I was the entire time that I was there shocked at how they maintained the back of the house and how important it was to them to have space in the back for team members be just as beautiful as the guest space. So I always remember them for that. And when I did my book launch, I went back to that hotel and did it in the lobby there. And I went in the back of the house. I swear to you, it was nearly just as gorgeous as it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it really did shock me. It really truly did. So I do think that's such an important thing, that even if you can't make it as glamorous as the front, what can you do to make those employee associate areas friendly, warm, comfortable, and a place for respite when they need it? So
That's
I
it.
love that.
That's a great point. I never really thought about the aesthetics of or the enhancements that could be made to those back of house areas. But I would say that I did feel that myself and the other 300 or so associates at the Rittenhouse, that we were certainly treated with five diamond service,
Nice.
even though we weren't the guest, we were the employee. we were appreciated, right? And that is
Love
the
that.
kind of work environment that everybody deserves to find themselves in.
Yes. And I will say that that is the most important.
Yes.
Yes. Now, you painted such a vivid picture of when you got to be the guest at the Rittenhouse with your boyfriend. From being greeted as Mr. and Mrs. to the upgrade, the bellman waiting for you to tour you to the room. You were celebrated every step of the way, just like one of your most VIP guests. Can you walk us through that experience and share how it changed the way you serve others afterwards?
Yeah, so that's another key example of how the Rittenhouse showed their appreciation
Mhm.
for the staff. So just to kind of recap, so once you were approaching your kind of 90-day introductory period, you were given this opportunity to experience life as a guest at the Rittenhouse. Now, keep in mind, this was not just because I was a concierge. A
Right,
housekeeper was
right.
afforded the same opportunity, right? So no, regardless of your job title or function, you
Mhm.
had this unbelievable opportunity to stay overnight. And keep in mind, this was a property where, an overnight, the value of an overnight stay, this is probably about $1,000 value, room night plus dinner at La Croix. And at the time, La Croix had just been named the best restaurant by Esquire magazine in the whole country. So
Wow.
this was a lavish
Mhm.
overnight experience. So yeah, it was a quick education, an eye-opening way to really see the impact that we provide for the guests. And one just really kind of silly but quick example of an insight that I had was time and time again when I was working, guests would call down frustrated, not being able to figure out our HVAC touchpad. And there wasn't an issue with it. It just was a complicated
Right.
touchpad, right? It required a little hand holding. So having now had this overnight stay and having the bellman educate me on it and being able to put my finger on the darn touchpad myself now
Mhm.
gave me intel. So when guests, the next time I was on shift in uniform, asked me about that touchpad, I was so much more confident and was able to really hold their hand and walk them through what to do. So that's just a simple example. But when you can
Yes.
have that lived experience, there's no better education than that.
No better education than that. And that is why when I saw that chapter, Be the Guest, I'm like, oh, that's my program. I have always had a program called the Be the Guest, and it has like almost like a scavenger hunt, if you will, of challenges of what you have to accomplish as you go through it, and you get to experience being the guest. And I offer this as a volunteer program to every team member, and then I would have a debrief session with them afterwards and go, what did you learn? What surprised you? What was challenging being our guest? And we learned exactly like you said, all of those little nuances that guests have and challenges. And I remember, as a matter of fact, back at that Marriott that I was at, we had very unusual tub stoppers. And from there, came to so many new solutions on how to describe that, how to explain it to guests, and it completely changes your perspective when you step in the guest shoes. And
Yeah.
I was just thinking, for our listeners out there, I am going to put in the show notes my Be Our Guest checklist, if you will, my scavenger hunt. So if any of you would like that, you can go to the show notes and click on that. I'm going to give you that because that's such an amazing way to really welcome your team members, make them feel special, make them feel like they're a VIP, and teach them so much that they'll never learn in a checklist or a training video.
Absolutely. Christine, do you think it's common that hotels do this kind of familiarization stay, or was I really fortunate that this was an offering?
You know what? I can't speak for luxury. Maybe it's more standard, but no, I talk about this this program that I do a lot with a lot of different companies, and very few people do it. And
Mm.
especially since the pandemic, with reduced staffing and labor shortages and whatnot, all the extras were put on a shelf. And I said this a million times. I'm going to say it again because you can't hear this message too many times. That today in our four walls, we have team members, we have general managers that are leading these hotels that have never seen 2019 service.
Mm.
They don't even know what it looks like. So when we think, we people who've been around for a long time, decades, we think they know the basics. They don't. They came into our industry during transaction only. Here's your key. There's the elevators. Breakfast is 6 to 10.
Interesting.
They've never seen what it looked like before. And for all of us who have been around for a long time, we forgot because not all of us, but many of us, a lot of it's on the shelf. One of the most common things I hear today is, oh, yeah, we used to do that. We just got to get it out of the basement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of work that muscle again.
Yes. Yes. Work that muscle again. Yes, exactly. Now, let me ask you this. What do you believe most people get wrong about luxury? I have never worked in luxury. I've opened resorts, full service, select service, but not luxury. What do you think most people get wrong about luxury?
So I think people assume that there could not possibly be a self check-in in a luxury environment, or there could not possibly be kind of an AI substitution in luxury.
Okay.
And what I'll say to that is, I think as long as you're offering a choice
Yes.
to the guest and allowing for there to be personalization in that way, I'm supportive of that. I mean, I am certainly the person that will always want somebody to hold my hand. I will always want somebody to go through property information, be
Make
there to
me
field
feel special.
questions. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's what I'm paying for. But if somebody else, if that's not their cup of tea and they have just come in on a long haul international flight or a red eye and they just simply want to grab a key, have from their pre-registered room and go right up to bed, that's okay too.
Yes.
So, and that still would be 5 diamond or 5-star service because that's what brings that particular guest joy. That's their preference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind is that there just should always be a choice.
Yes. And it's funny because when I talk about yes is the answer, the third step is offer options. Now, if I go in and there are no human checkout lines, I'm like, what was that word? Checkout lines. If there are no human checkout lines available and it's only automated do it yourself, I'm mad because you are dictating to me what I have to do and I'm being forced into it and I'm not getting any discount for doing my own work.
Correct.
But if I go in to CVS and I see the clerk has a long line, I'd rather go there, but I see this long line, I'm in a hurry. I'm glad that there is an automated option. But the key right there is choice.
Correct. And right. So everybody can find something again that brings them joy. And then that is the personalization that they're looking for.
Yes, I love that. Now, what about on the perspective of being a team member? So many people, maybe even myself included, I've got this really fun personality. And maybe I thought I was not cut out for luxury because I'm not stiff and snooty. To dispel some of that for our listeners, that it's not, maybe it is that. Maybe it is that. You need to be that kind of person, or maybe it's not. Tell me what we get wrong about that.
So I think that starts at the top with kind of the culture at that particular luxury hotel. So I have definitely, I feel very privileged that my family, in recent years, we have been able to stay at some really, really gorgeous properties. And there are some, I'm not going to name some, but there are some luxury hotels that the staff is exactly what you just described. Zero personality, stiff, and they know nothing about the local city that they're in because they're just like from another city or state or country and they just have decided to work at that hotel and they got the job 2 weeks ago. However, I have also been at properties where there is such an infusion of local culture and fun and personality. And I'll use that word again. I love authenticity and keeping it
Mm-hmm.
real. And you can have luxury and you can absolutely have a personality. My catchphrase I always use is polished, but with a personality.
Yes.
And I think the two absolutely can be married together. And I find it frustrating. Again, I'm not going to name the property's name, but at a recent experience where I was at a very ultra luxurious property, there was zero personality. It was so
Yes.
sterile, right?
Yes.
So I believe when you're paying for luxury, people do want personality, refined
Yes.
personality, polished personality, but
Right.
I think they work hand in hand.
100%. And I was doing some consulting at a very luxurious resort in Sedona. And I'll be honest with you, I even had a little bit of imposter syndrome, because I had not previously been at a resort. No, not a resort. I've been at resorts, but not of that luxury status. And I was questioning whether I could be of service to them. And oh my gosh, I left with so many buckets of wisdom, if you will. And one of the main things that I can remember and pull out from that is one of the things they pride themselves is the golden nuggets of finding the golden nuggets about your guests. And there were many times where I gave the golden nuggets specifically to see what would happen. And there were a couple times where they asked, but 0 times did they use the golden nugget. And that's the biggest key, that when we find out the golden nugget about somebody, then to use it either to bring it up in another conversation, or when you find out a preference, you can accommodate that preference. Except I'm going to give you an example. Okay. Because I'm not a luxury person. I have never, prior to this day, I had never gotten a massage.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm not a massage person. I just kind of weirded me out. And I needed to do that to test all the different
Mm.
areas. Well, I let them know in the call that I was very anxious about it, and that, I was asking, the steps and how naked I have to get and all of the things. But when I got there was no extra care about all the anxiety that I had about it.
Oh, too bad.
Right. And that was such an honest and genuine, not like I wasn't even faking that to see what they would do. Such a missed opportunity to really go and then make that massage experience like, oh, I love this. They really made me feel comfortable. And you know what I mean? And not that they didn't make me feel comfortable, but they didn't take what I gave them and then really nurture that. And that's where I think most of us lose out, because our guests tell us the golden nuggets. They want to feel special. They want you to think their story is the first time you ever heard that kind of story. But it's what we do with it. And that's, I think, a super big key there.
Absolutely. Well, Christine, if you ever find yourself with a client that needs things tested that you don't feel comfortable with, please feel free to phone a friend. I am more than happy to stand in for massages, facials, etc.
I will keep you on speed dial. That's so great. Now, in your book, again, it's not just all fun and stories, but it's a lot of fun stories. Let's talk about your 5 keys to service excellence and how they can be applied across different industries. Hey, Wise Pineapples. Oh my goodness. Isn't this episode with Jamie so juicy? I just loved our conversation, and there is so much more. So stay tuned for part 2 next Monday, and she is going to dig into her 5 keys. She's going to talk about the number 1 barrier in customer service today, 3 things she looks for to indicate if a business is service driven, and her most outrageous guest story. And there's so much more than that, too. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Oh, and can I ask for your help? The more that you share this episode, like it, comment, the more I can bring to you. So please share and comment away. Bye for now. I'll see you next week. Bye.